New book exposes the secret gay cabal of Washington of lies, orgies, and presidents. That's a word we don't use enough, cabal. Secret City, The Hidden History of Gay Washington by James Kirchick offers an in-depth and well-researched account of the underground world of primarily white gay men through presidential administrations from Franklin Roosevelt to Bill Clinton. The focus of the book is primarily white gay men since they were more likely to have positions of power during the racist, misogynistic era that the book covers. Kirchick says, quote, "I do talk about lesbians, but women had very little political power during the Cold War era. It was all about white men, and women didn't have security clearances, therefore that didn't put them on the FBI's radar," end quote. He adds that gay male sexuality was much more policed, particularly by the FBI, while stating, quote, "Unlike gay men, women weren't having sex in public places, and gay bars were far more likely to get raided than a lesbian bar." He also speaks about lesbians and how gay men and their sexuality was only revealed after they died, just because they could be arrested and lose their jobs. Kirchick says, quote, "Of all the gay men in his book, Sumner Welles, who became Franklin Roosevelt's Undersecretary of State in 1937 after serving in various diplomatic roles, was likely the most influential. When Cordell Hull made a plot to try and oust Welles to Roosevelt, or out Welles to Roosevelt, the president protected and defended Welles. He was perhaps one of Roosevelt's top key advisors during his presidency."
Wow.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, if you think of the status of gay people in America, say in the 1950s, this is a community of people who are medically pathologized by the psychiatric community. It says, they say that gay people are mentally ill. They are condemned by organized religion, and it's against the law to be gay. They're criminalized in all 50 states. And to go from that to where we are today, where you have every corporation is celebrating pride, and you have parades, you have an openly gay cabinet secretary, which would have been just unimaginable, and you have legal equality for gay people. It's really an incredible journey.
You tell a lot of different stories and anecdotes along the way, including the lavender scare, which many people may not remember or be familiar with.
Yeah, this accompanied the Red Scare during the McCarthy period, and it was the purge of gay men and women from the federal government, and it began in 1950 around, and it really lasted for, as I said earlier, I mean, in the federal civil service, it lasted until 1975, and then it wasn't until almost 45 years later that gay people are finally allowed to have security clearances. And it's estimated 7,000 to 10,000 people lost their jobs. The number might even be higher because a lot of people quit before they could be found out because they didn't want their sexual orientation to be discovered.
One of the lines in the book, which I think is really powerful, you say, even at the height of the Cold War, it was safer to be a communist than a homosexual. How do you think that some of those themes of the past still resonate today?
Well, I think, again, I mentioned this earlier, this sort of groomer rhetoric, this talk about, well, this attempt to ban, teachers from discussing sexual orientation or gender identity.
Don't Say Gay Bill.
The Don't Say Gay Bill in Florida. And it's this association of homosexuality with whatever is the worst possible thing.
Yeah, I mean, he puts it into context that the lavender scare was a real thing, that if you screwed up, you could like point across the table and go, yeah, but I think he might be gay, just to get people off of your tail. And it made our nation less secure than more secure by denying qualified people and threatening them with outing them to their friends and family. And Hoover, who was notoriously most likely family, but he pursued it more zealously than anybody over the course of basically this entire period.
Yeah, and this was not just like a matter of outing too. This was going to destroy somebody's life entirely. This wasn't even like the lives we've known, where it was hard on us. It might even cost us our family. But I mean, this would have destroyed somebody's life completely. He would have no recovery.
Yep.
When I think about Alan Turing over in England, this is the man who cracked the Enigma code, and look how they treated him. They chemically castrated him, and then he ended up taking his own life. And I have a sneaking suspicion, because we're everywhere and we have networks everywhere, that story from England somehow managed to get over here. And I think even to this day, we have, I won't mention any politicians' names, but I'm sure they're deeply in the closet still.
Oh, plenty.
Sure.
Yeah.
I feel as if the lavender scare is really nothing of the past. It's now in the present again, with DeSantisism happening instead of McCarthyism. It's a really scary time, and I think it's really important for all of our organizations to band together. And like you had said, we have a great network. We need to really work our networks and become one and united in our community.
And it's not just DeSantis. We've got Greg Abbott in Texas. God only knows who else we've got. I know that there are gubernatorial candidates who.
Oh my God, Rubio's ad that just came out is insane. It's he literally comes out and the first thing he says is, Democrats are trying to make your boys into girls. Quote.
Oh Lord.
It's insane.
There's a psychological term called projection, and that's all I'm going to say on that point.
I'd just like to say, as a child of immigrants, I'm very fortunate to live in this country and to live in a time where me as a queer individual, I actually have access and a platform to create some sort of, not control, but have some sort of influence politically, because I don't forget that in the Caribbean and other parts of the world, queer people are still living in persecution and in fear, and it's illegal to exist in these countries. So I'm grateful that while we still have a lot of issues here in America, look at how far we come and look at what we're doing now.
And can I add to that? Because he ended his segment there by saying, basically saying how bad it was then, and look where we are in Washington now. And I have this. While I believe completely we need to, come together as a community in a way that I don't think we've been for a couple decades now, to be honest. But I really feel that that's part of it. But I also feel deeply passionate about, and it almost tags on what you just said. That's what I'm saying, that at some point we have to quit playing victim, and at some point we need to become strong and be on top, and quit always coming from this perspective of being down. I mean, at some point you have to rise up and stand up and be in control, instead of roll over and constantly have something to bitch about and be a victim about again.
Well, and that points to a question of, I'll speak for myself. I lost friends to HIV/AIDS, and I certainly didn't lose as many as other people I knew.
Sure.
How much did we lose?
A lot.
The people who might have kept us in that mind frame of, hey, we got to be on top. We can't play this victim role.
Agreed. But it's time to wake up. It's time to wake up.
No argument.
Yeah.
But we just got. You're absolutely right that we got to remember where we came from, and I certainly don't have the wherewithal as some of the people I knew back in the day. But I think if we return back to the old saying of an army of lovers cannot fail, and there's also a little bit of understanding of I certainly have blind spots around, my go-to is issues with women, but, trans people, I have blind spots around trans people simply because I don't know any. Or if I have, they were certainly flying under my gaydar because it's severely broken. But yeah, we learn to work together, and, if I say something ignorant, I'm saying something ignorant because I just don't know any better.
Sure.
And there's a.
Well, I think that's one of the things we've lost. We've lost that. We've lost that forgiveness and ability to learn. We're always ready to tackle, or we're always so much happier to be offended than be a teacher, and so I try really hard to not be offended, and if I offend somebody, I try to react quickly and learn where I'm coming from, or maybe they misunderstood where I'm coming from. But the dialogue is what we've lost, and that's what's split our community apart, in something that I think is very tragic for our community. But I do believe we are in a place, in this time, especially with DeSantism and Trumpism and everything that we're reeling from. But I I really believe we need to come from a space of not being victimed and not being passive and starting to be, show strength and a sense of, I hate to say, but a sense of domination, to not allow ourselves to be a victim anymore. If you don't want to be victimized, you have to stand up. You have to be strong. But if your every day is looking for how are we a victim today, we remain a victim. And it's a psychological shift. That's all it is. And I really think our community is in the spot where it's time to make that psychological shift. It's time to moxie up.
Well, I'd like to talk about that for a quick second. 80 years ago, obviously, you couldn't you were just protecting yourself, protecting your life. Nowadays, we have advocacy groups. We have amazing groups. How can we become the advocates that our forefathers couldn't? And you're very involved in community and advocacy. Where do you see this going? And I'm going to come to you for that answer, so get ready.
Why don't you go first? I need a second to think. That's a fully loaded question.
Well, I think we all have to own and cultivate our strengths. I don't think we all even know the power we have. I don't think we're aware of how we can fully utilize our potential or our resources. So just knowing that we all bring something to the table, and while everybody doesn't have to be out front with a picket fence, there is work we can all do, and holding each other accountable and not being afraid to have tough conversations, not being afraid to have solicited constructive criticism, and just understanding that even though we all have our own personal interests, there's a lot of things that we can do collectively that will also make sure we all win and we all can move forward. Because I am living not to be stagnant, I'm living for progress, but I don't only want to see myself progress, I want to see my entire community shine and feel seen and heard.
Wow, that was eloquent. How the heck am I going to follow that up?
Give it a shot, honey. Yeah.
You had mentioned the word victim. I am a trans woman, and I'm victimized every day.
I'm sure.
And I'm strong.
I got that too.
I think empathy is needed as well as being
Agreed.
strong. And I think more empathy needs to be sent out to different people in our community, not just the trans community, but different components of our community. We've been beaten down, alphabet soup, as they call us. So I think we need to help each other and reach our hands out to each other.
Yes.
I think we need to make peace with each other
Yes.
to create that dominance and that strength.
Yes.
You know,
Agreed.
I would like to know that I could count on everybody at this table to have my back.
Of course you can.
And I would have everybody's back here.
Yes. Yes.
But this is in this form, in this setting, in this now. How do we translate that to everybody in our community, not just the community that's more seen, if that makes sense? So how can we do that?
Well, your experience working in groups with Hollywood Pride, and that city raised its HRC city approval score from something like 25% or something, a ridiculously low number, up to a perfect 100.
100
that they announced at earlier this year's inaugural Hollywood Pride.
Sure.
So when you get in and you're working with organizations like that, you're working with the city and you're working with community and you're working with the community at large and our communities.
Right.
That's a place to affect change. How was your experience working with that, with the city, just on a very micro level?
So it's interesting that you say that, because my part in that whole index score being raised was I was one of the featured person in a documentary, stories from the LGBTQ community, called Open Dialogues. And it's a 22-minute documentary with 7 different people that were interviewed from the LGBTQ plus community. So that particular documentary was played to different commissioners, different people in the Hollywood political arena, and I was on the panel answering questions with the chief of police, blah, blah, blah. It became an emotional thing, and people got to see how real we are, with the thread of humanity in us. And when you're able to touch people with that, then they're like, oh, this person is like me. And then you break down that wall. So my point of view is that I'm by no means a pacifist, but I believe that getting people to understand that we're all the same is the key in our community and outside of our community. How to do that, I haven't figured out yet, but I'm surrounded by a lot of very intelligent people that I'm sure could help move this whole idea forward.
Yeah.
The one thing I'm kind of frustrated by, and I noticed this earlier this year, I posted something on one of my gay Disney groups because I figured, okay, these people, a lot of the people and they took it right down. Oh, we don't want to be political. And it's like, people, I'm sorry, politics is a matter of life and death for all of us. It's a matter of life because I guarantee you, and I'm going to get a little extreme, these people are lining up, they've already talked about firing squads, some of these people. And I think Benjamin Franklin said it best. We got to all hang together or we'll all hang separately.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I just want to add one more thing if I can. I was just going to say that I think one of the it's interesting that two topics in my head collide here today. And those two topics that collide are, we talked about gay history being taught to seniors in Miami-Dade. But I was, even as I listened to that story, I'm thinking, and I don't want to offend any of our viewers or because I know you're a little young too, but I feel like one of our problems is that we're worrying about teaching gay history in the schools, which we rightfully should, but we're not even doing a good job of it to our young own that are in our community. Many of them have no clue what's happened before them, and I think they are in a false sense of security, that they don't quite grasp how quickly everything could turn right back around. And so I think that part of what would align us as a community is understanding where we've all come from, how we got here, and all of the things that happened, at least in the last 50 years, maybe even longer. I mean, if we wanted to really talk about gay history, well, that's millennia, right? But we can certainly at least say, in what's kind of pertinent is what happened in this country in the last 50 years, maybe even 60 or so, or post-war or during the World War II. What brought us to where we are now as gay people and lesbian people and all of the above? But I don't think a lot of the young people even have a grasp of that at all. And so that frightens me that we're not even focusing enough on our own community to make them aware while we fight for it in our schools, which I'm not saying we shouldn't have in schools, but I think that if you're a young person and you're not aware of how it all got to be where you're at, which I think is a lot now, I think that's dangerous because it's a false sense of security. Like, I mean, I was literally on the street and hearing a conversation in Wilton Manors one day, and these 20-somethings were talking about gay marriage, and I heard somebody say, well, it's been around for like 40 years. And I just I sat there and I was like,
Girl.
It's shocking. No.
7 years, maybe?
Yeah, right. But
Six months is 40 years to
but that's what
to
I'm
a
saying.
20-year-old,
Like,
yeah.
they need to get the real reality, right? They need to understand how we've gotten where we're at and what we're really doing and how we've really gotten here. But to think you're so secure that this has been around forever and it's not going to go away.
But here's the thing. We've already watched them tear down Roe with the Hobbs decision or whatever it was called. The women are waking up, and some of them are lesbian women and trans women, and maybe even some trans men who it's like, oh shit, pardon my language. Please God, these girls have their gays. God knows I've got my own straight women friends and they talk. I mean, I have a woman friend up in Tallahassee that we had a disagreement over the primary, and she ripped me a new one. God bless her anyway. But I certainly am taking a lesson from the that recent Supreme Court decision, because it was like that. I mean, it was an oh crap moment for me, because I mean, everybody was saying they're coming after contraception and gay marriage and this, that, and the other thing, and you know, unfortunately it's a slow process, but you know, let's hope that, you know, people talk, and you know, if they need to whoop me upside the head, well, here's my head. That's why there's no hair there, because of.
Don't talk to me about why there's no hair there. But hopefully, marriage is going to get protected in a vote after the midterm during the lame duck session. That was excellent. Thank you, guys.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Lara are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out Television Network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ plus community.